AviationPros.com is the portal website for AMT, Airport Business, and Ground Support Worldwide magazines. Visit daily for breaking news, industry blogs, and insightful articles from our magazine's editorial team. And don't forget to sign up for our publication's daily e-newsletters. It's all at AviationPros.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Aviation Pros podcast. I'm Joe Petrie, Editorial Director for the Endeavor Aviation Group. Airline relations is one of the most important aspects of airport leadership. These entities have separate goals, challenges, and needs, but the symbiotic nature of their existence means leaders from both airlines and airports need to work together through challenges, disagreements, and overall vision in order to come up with the solutions that work for everyone. As one of the biggest domestic market shareholders in North America, Southwest Airlines balances relationships with airport leaders from markets of all sizes and different goals for their facilities. I recently had an opportunity to talk with Steve Sisneros, Vice President of Airport Affairs for Southwest Airlines, about airline relations, the success a good program can bring, and some real-life examples of where the airline has seen mutual growth with their airport partners. All right, Steve. Well, thank you very much for taking a few minutes to speak with me today on this topic. So I guess the first question I had for you is tell me a little bit of an overview of the importance of the strong business relationships between airlines and airports out there.
Boy, that's a great question, but that's, I think, the foundation between everything we try to do across the industry at our airports. So just the unique nature of how the U.S. model is set up with kind of over federal control through regulatory compliance with our airports, but yet they're all locally owned assets. So whether it be a city or municipally run airport or a county, port authority, or even an authority set up separately, the unique structure of how the airport sponsors are set up makes the relationships different from one airport to another. And so our team at Airport Affairs, our subject matter experts, have a portfolio of airports, and they serve as the company's primary corporate contact with that airport to deal with both, the lease agreements, rates and charges, methodologies, operational issues to secure what we need for our commercial activity at our airport. So building those relationships and being present with our airport partners is critical to be able to achieve those needs for both the airport as well as for Southwest, especially in places where we're big.
Mm-hmm. And I got to imagine there's got to be a lot of unique challenges to some of these markets, given the size of something like Southwest Airlines. But tell me, what are some of the typical challenges that an airline like yours can face when establishing and maintaining relationships with an airport?
So coming through the pandemic, we're dealing with really two main challenges with our airport partners. One is that airports in the United States are going through a renaissance of replacing infrastructure or building new infrastructure. So many, as you know, Joe, many facilities were built 60s, 70s, and 80s. The business model or the customer experience expectations for our customers it's just changed. And so we understand the need for many of our airports to replace that aging infrastructure or to build new capacity. The challenge is that they're all doing it at the same time, at least through this decade. If you look out through 2031, 32, most, if not all, of our largest airports are going through some form of capital development. And the other challenge to that is the fact that they're not in the hundreds of millions, it's over $1 billion. And so while we need these things for our customers, we need these things for our growth and our future commercial activity, they come at a high price tag. And therein lies the other challenge, which is coming out of the pandemic, material, labor, and cost escalation has really hit hard from a rates and charges policy. If you look back on just to operate a maintenance budget, just the O&M piece with our airports going back to 2019, some airports have had O&M increases above 75% if you look back. And, traditionally, pre-COVID, airports that really did a good job maintaining their annual budget, if you had less than 10% increase in O&M, you're dealing with contractual wage increases, you're dealing with, renewing and replacement with regard to the facilities, keeping the place clean and up to date. That was pretty common. Most of our airports were really under that 10%. Now that's the exception. And so we're working really hard with our airports to drive the O&M back down, because these significantly double-digit increases in operating and maintenance budgets is unsustainable in the long term. So that's a big challenge my team is engaged with our airport partners.
And there's definitely a lot of growth that like you mentioned, as far as these airports. Speaking personally, having gone through both Harry Reid and Kansas City in the last 2 weeks, I definitely see what you're talking about with large Southwest hubs and the amount of construction you're dealing with. So I got to imagine collaboration has got to be a key issue for an airline when it comes to navigating its relationship with these airports. So tell me, how do you navigate the collaboration dynamics between an airline and an airport, given they are separate entities with different priorities?
Certainly. So I think Southwest has been a leader when it comes to sort of doing something new with our airport partners with capital development. And you brought up Kansas City as an example. So if you look back at the history of that project, it stretched back 10, 12 years. It was a very complicated process to get that moving. There was a perspective within the local community. And this is where you say, we always use a tired, but I think true slogan when we say, when you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. And I get asked all the time, what does that really mean? And it really has to do with the airport sponsor and therefore the local community that makes it unique. So in Kansas City's case, you had a local population that had a perspective that the airport was convenient because of the proximity of curbside drop-off and 75 feet to the gate. There weren't your traditional long walks to concourses and so on. So there was also a perspective in the city that because it was a city-owned asset, that any money spent at the airport would affect the city budget. In other words, if I spend $1 billion on an airport, I'm not going to get my trash picked up, or I'm not going to get the potholes fixed in the community. So those were two issues that we found were interesting, that we had to work with our airport to educate the community. So obviously the airport's an enterprise fund and receives AIP grants and has to follow all the grant assurances. So no city dollars obviously would be used, or general tax revenue would be used to fund it. And the other piece was convincing the community that they needed, that something was new. And we came to the conclusion, not just Southwest, but the airlines collectively came to the conclusion that something new had to be done. So with that, once we agreed on what it was, we worked with the airport under the lease agreement, where the airlines secured strong voting rights, not simply an MII, a majority in interest, but we were actually embedded into the project. We have a lot of experience leading capital around the country. And so we inserted ourselves in the project team, and we had approvals, or should I say co-approvals with the city on budget, on scope, on change orders. And so while it was a publicly run project, meaning the city of Kansas City ran the project, we were embedded into it. And it was probably one of the first of its kind anywhere I've seen in my career, where the airlines had a vote through the entire project. And ultimately it was successful, $1.5 billion. It came in on time and on budget. We had some challenging conversations with the city when the pandemic struck because the project was underway. But that's an example of what we're trying to emulate around the country. So as airports where Southwest is big and they are contemplating large capital development in the buildings, we're in negotiations on how can we replicate that business model within the lease agreement to give us a strong voice and bring value, frankly, and bring value to the project.
And I know that aviation is such a dynamic industry overall, especially the time we're in right now. It's not just about the shiny new buildings in a lot of cases. It also has a lot to do with the technology and even the regulations that are changing the industry. So tell me, from an airline perspective, how can you work with a partner like an airport to be able to tackle these technology upgrades, and then also, any kind of regulatory changes that might be coming along the pike?
Well, that's a tension that we're dealing with from our customer. I'll just use our customer experience team. So our customer experience team, the world's changing. There are expectations that customers have on what they would expect within the airport. There's expectations on the aircraft, for example, and what all the investments Southwest is making on the in-flight experience. And so things that your normal airline properties individuals would push back on as grandiose or excessive are now considered utility. They're part of the day-to-day experience in traveling with an airport. So, but however, their airports have to respond to their community, and we recognize that. They're the front door for many people coming into town, and they're also the last thing people see when they leave town. So we recognize that we have a role to play in working with our airport partners on that. But I'm not going to say it's rainbows and sunshine all the time. We get into honest disagreements with our airports on what they're going to spend and what they're going to try to implement and what they're going to charge us. So, but that's normal. That's part of the business, and that's okay. If you have a strong relationship with your airport partners, you can have frank and honest conversations. And I would say all of our airports, we have those conversations, and they come to us and they talk through it, what they're trying to do, and where do we come to some understanding of what we're willing to invest in.
That's an interesting point you bring up. It's not always rainbows and sunshine. And of course, there's a lot of challenges that can go into that. A lot of the public facing when it comes to airline airports might be a ribbon cutting or a cake for a new route, but they don't see the actual back end in a lot of cases as to what goes into making some of these things happen. So my question is for you is, what communication strategies and coordination mechanisms are crucial for a successful collaboration between an airline and an airport?
It all comes down to the relationship and building that relationship early and being present. So there's a phrase I like to use with my team. I say the only way to build relationships is to actually go there and build the relationship. You can't really do this over the phone. And so to be present during these conversations. And I don't think people really understand outside the aviation industry how hard it is, how these projects are really challenging, because what you're doing is you're building things in the middle of a moving operation. So, how does an airport develop a major project and not impact severely an operation? So can you live through the surgery of a facility expansion? And these are really complicated and they're really hard. And also from the business standpoint, some of these business deals we put together, how they're financed, all the different financing levers, are hard. And these aren't easy things, but that's part of the love and passion the team has, is that because they're hard, because they're challenging, you get into these negotiations that could sometimes take years to accomplish. For example, Southwest is going to be leading the construction of Concourse Zero at LAX. We have a strong track record of leading terminal projects in LA. We did Terminal 1 modernization. We built 1.5, Terminal 1.5. That's $1 billion that we built on behalf of LAWA. And now we just signed and the city council passed the ground lease for Concourse Zero. My time rate may be off, Joe, but it 4 or 5 years it probably took to negotiate that deal. Now, keep in mind, we had a big pause in 2020 and 21 because of the pandemic, but it's a complicated and very interesting deal on how it was put together, but it just took time. And so, but that's some of the love that the people, my team have, is that they roll their sleeves up, they work with the airport, and collectively through the airport leadership, they were committed to getting a deal. We were committed to getting a deal, and we finally did it. So that's where the partnership, when things get hard, where the partnership really comes into play, that you can get together, get in the room, roll up your sleeves, and come to an understanding to get a deal.
So if you're an airport executive that's getting into this, obviously there's a lot of stakeholders involved and a lot of interests, and we touched on collaboration before, but how do you strike that balance between the interest in the airline and the goals of the airport to create a mutually beneficial relationship?
Well, sometimes there's a tension there. Sometimes that we don't agree, and that's okay. I mean, I'm not, throughout my career, there's been projects that we have opposed that airports have proceeded on. And so I think the key is having to get in as early as you can. Sometimes if it rubs the carriers, things have advanced to some degree and we get brought into it, it creates some problems with regards to the relationship. But I think our team has worked hard on that. They're starting to really, I think we've turned the corner over the last few years where they're really coming to us early. They're coming to us and saying, we need your help, we need your support. How do we move this forward? What's best for Southwest? How do we design this to meet your expectations and your customers? So I think, if you were to ask me this question 5-10 years ago, I think I may have given a different answer. Today, especially coming through the pandemic, I think the pandemic got us closer, meaning that we were in this ecosystem where passengers disappeared. And we were asking things of our airport partners in 2020 and 2021 that we had never done. And by and large, they all came through. The COVID grants, 3 relief packages coming out of Congress. We worked hard with our airports to put those dollars in the right spots from a cost center and airline cost center perspective. That saved us substantial dollars to get us through the pandemic. So I would argue that coming through COVID, we've been closer than we were prior, and that's made us more dependable on each other, that we recognize we're part of an ecosystem and that we're better when we work together, but recognizing that sometimes there may be some differences of opinion, and that's okay.
And with those differences of opinions, tell me some of the insights into the negotiation skills that are essential for building a successful partnership in the aviation industry.
So from our standpoint, obviously spending time to build a relationship, and it's from 2 different aspects. So it's the CEO of the airport director, and their staff. But it's also our local operations. So, we need our people, my team, need to be experts on how the operation works. So how does a customer, if they go from curbside to traveling to bag claim, that they understand every square footage of that facility and are experts of how that process works and how the operation works. So they build those relationships with our local station leaders, our general managers, and their teams, so that they serve as a resource to our local folks when they need something that has to do with the airport. The other is that I'm a big believer in my team becoming experts in airport finance and all the levers that are used to fund airport capital. So I encourage them, or have encouraged them, to they are privy, or they are well versed in the bond documents when an airport goes to market. They understand reading the official statements, being part of the conversations when an airport does go to market. Sometimes we get pulled into the interviews process when an airport goes to do their roadshow with the rating agencies. But understanding those levers is critical to negotiating the business deals. And so I think I'm proud of the team over the years. They've taken a lot of time to really understand all those levers and become true experts in airport finance, because you can't negotiate a win-win on a business deal without understanding all those different levers. And then you just be patient. You have to understand that these things take time. But you also have, when we're chair of an airport affairs committee, you have other airlines that may have different interests, and that's normal across the industry. So you're trying to garner their opinions on the other carrier side while you're negotiating a capital project with an airport. So there's a lot of different stakeholders to involve in the process, and that's one of the reasons why these things take a while.
And speaking of stakeholders and complex negotiations, we were talking a little bit about the technology advancements that have hit the industry in recent years specifically. Can you example how does Southwest leverage this technology to enhance its relationship with airports and improve operational efficiency?
Well, I would say that from a relationship standpoint and working with our airports, some of the things that have come out of, just top of mind, some of the things that come out of COVID have allowed us to be more connected with our airports than we were before. Sort of like the medium I'm using to talk to you today. And I know with our airport partners, they're also, from a technology standpoint, they're looking to make investments to add more flexibility at the airports. Flexibility has always been a concern to ours from the airline side, because when an airport talks about flexibility, that usually means higher cost. But we understand some of the reasons behind it, because once some capital development is done, that might be the limit of what they can build. The airfield is only so big, their terminal layout is only so big, so they want to maximize the efficiencies within their facility. So we've done a sea change in our philosophy on how we recognize and understand some of those pressures that an airport may try to implement. However, that sometimes comes into tension with how Southwest runs its business. And what I mean by that is that in many of our places, we're running turns per gate higher than any of our competitors, and we have a history of doing that. Even with the higher gauge of aircraft, we're still turning higher. I'll use Las Vegas as an example, where we have 30 gates and we have nearly 270 flights. That's an average of almost 9.5 turns a gate, and you're doing that with a fleet of half of 800s, which is a 175-seat airplane. And the operation is doing it day in and day out. And so having your proprietary systems and having your own ability to communicate with your headquarters is important when you have a size of that operation. Interestingly, Vegas has a common use system. So, the airport wanted to do that, and so we are on their platform. But in many cases, we would want our proprietary. So sometimes there's tensions with what an airport may want to do from improving their technological footprint with what an airline may have, specifically a high utilization airline like Southwest.
Now, on top of the service that airports are looking for from the airlines, the big thing they are very concentrated on is passenger experience inside their terminal. So how does a strong relationship with the airport and the airline contribute to a better overall customer experience for the passengers?
So you have what the airport will view as sort of their space as an customer comes into the airport. But our goals are the same. So what an airline like Southwest will try to do within our hold rooms, for example, how we want to communicate with our customers at our ticket counter. We have making sure that our customer has the right signages in place to make sure that they're moving quickly through ticket counters to, checking their bags through security checkpoint. So everything that we do is in concert with the airport. There's nothing that we can do at an airport that we just will do on our own. One, it's bad business practice to surprise an airport and say we just installed something that usually doesn't go very well. We want to tell them ahead of time what we're doing. Airports have standards. They want to make sure it fits within the decor of what their own facility, and sometimes there's tensions with that, but those are usually overcome. But I think where the airports have gone from the customer experience to where the airlines, especially Southwest, I think we're together on these things. And we're willing to make the investments to make sure that the customer is informed. One of the things I remember a few years ago when we were rolling out communication with our customers through our app, the boarding process, one of the things we pitched to our airport partners was, if our customers know that they're going to get a ding when the airplane on their app through their mobile device that a flight's about to board, they're going to spend a little bit more time. They may not rush. They may want to grab a coffee or grab something to eat. Because sometimes I think the American public, the traveling public, is used to getting to the gate and just kind of camping out and watching, making sure that they have the information if there's delays or weather or irregular operations. But having that proactiveness that Southwest has done in investments in communicating to our customers, they're a little bit freer to get things they need, which in my view, from an airport properties view, is adds to the non-airline revenue quotient. They're spending more money at the airport, which ends up helping the airlines. So I think that we've come a long way in being a cohesive view between the airports and Southwest on these type of initiatives. Where years ago, I think there was more tension in that.
And there's a lot of different touch points between the airline and airport. That isn't just a C-level discussion all the times. It goes all the way down the chain. What kind of training and development programs does Southwest implement to ensure its team has the necessary skills to navigate this complex relationship?
So we specifically designed our airport affairs team where we have our individual contributors that have their airport portfolios, where they have somewhere between 10 and 15 airports. And I think what we do intentionally different than some of our peers is that we try to limit the number of airports they have. So look, the business model of Southwest is different than the legacies, but my colleagues across the industry, the airport portfolios they sometimes have 20, 30, even 40 airports. They have their hubs, but then they have all the feeders. And there's no way you can get to them. There's no physical way you can build relationships at all the airports when you have that many to manage. So we specifically design the portfolio so that they're manageable and they're able to build strong relationships at all of them. We give them a portfolio of large and small, so that they have valued work. They have interesting work. They're in complex negotiations. They're dealing with capital development, but they also deal with some of our smaller places and build relationships there. But we specifically assign their leaders to have no city. So their direct reports don't have any city responsibilities, and their sole purpose is to coach and develop those that have the airport portfolios, which means traveling with them quite a bit, which means bringing their experience to bear. And, we have a new person that joined our team. He's a long Southwest veteran, but he came from another department. And I'll just use him as an example. I was talking to him yesterday about his new role and how excited he is about to be in airport affairs for Southwest. And I said, give yourself time. I said, give yourself a year and a half. I said, you really have to give yourself a year and a half of attending budget meetings and attending these meetings and with your leader, because then you'll understand it. If there's no way I can expect someone new to this field to jump in and negotiate a lease agreement with the history of it without having the history. So it just takes time. It takes time to understand airport rate methodologies. It takes time to understand how capital development occurs. And so we give them the grace to do that. And that's where their direct senior managers travel with them and give them that development and coaching along the way.
And speaking of coaching, obviously you've been doing this long enough. You've seen a lot of things. You've been involved with a lot of different challenges between the airport and the airline. What are some of the key lessons learned that could benefit someone getting into this airport affairs section and how to build a successful relationship with their partners?
I got asked. I'll use the same person asked me about. Do I still like it? And I love it. I love what we do. I love how we represent. I love the fact that my team is I'll be biased here, admittedly biased, that I think they're the best in the industry. And they represent Southwest in the most professional, but yet personal way. And because of that, they build strong relationships across the industry. And I want them to have a specific brand. I want them to have that external reputation, not just within my company, but to have that for them, that they're building a reputation for themselves, that they are viewed as experts in the industry. And that to me is the greatest joy I have, is the legacy that I'm passing on to my team on building that reputation for them. They individually, they build that reputation for themselves, and they get to be viewed as industry expert. They get invited to conferences and panels and represent Southwest in that professional manner. That's the greatest joy I have, is when I see that happening across the team, that I know that they have job satisfaction. They love what they do, and they represent Southwest in such a way that they get great things done, hard things, really hard things, but they get it done. Never happens as fast as we want them to, but it's great to see when they have those successes and they earn that reputation for themselves from an external standpoint.
And my last question for you today, we've talked a lot about the big changes in both technology and relationships and facilities and how the airlines are operating. Considering the evolving landscape of the aviation industry, what future trends do you anticipate in terms of collaboration between airlines and airports?
I mean, it just has to get stronger. I mean, there's so much capital development on the horizon, which is great for a commercial standpoint, but then you have the tension on paying for it all. So we have to work together. And that's what sort of my direction to the team has been, is that we just have to get in early, understand the needs, bring all the stakeholders within Southwest to be part of that conversation, not just airport affairs. But it's going to get more complicated and more challenging because there's a finite limit of resources. And so that to me is what I see as exciting, but it's also a challenge in the years ahead, is how to get these things done without breaking the bank.
Fantastic. Steve, very fascinating conversation today. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and give us a little bit more of an insight into what it takes to make these relationships successful.
All right, Joe.
Exclusive insights from top leaders in the industry, giving information unavailable anywhere else in the market. I'm Joe Petrie. We'll catch you next time.